All right, so this is Animate CC in the Flash Runtimes at Adobe MAX. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is just go sort of like a run through of kind of the major things that I was involved with at Max, some of the more general things at Max that had to do with Animate CC to show people who weren't there just what a great presence Animate actually had at Max. And then some additional things around the Flash runtimes and related things that were released around that time. So let's go ahead and just kind of move along. I've got some demos I can show as well. So depending upon how much time we have and so forth, we can get into that stuff. So my name is Joseph Labrecque, and I'm a Senior Interactive Software Engineer for the University of Denver. And I'm also an Adobe Education Leader and Community Professional and an author for lynda.com, Peachpit, Apress, Pluralsight, and a lot of other different places. So about Max 2016. So it was held in San Diego this year, which was really nice because for the past, I can't even remember how many years, well, ever since 2009, it's been held in Los Angeles. So Los Angeles is fine for something like that. However, you know, having gone almost every year since it moved to Los Angeles, it was nice to have sort of a change of scenery, see a different city. I had never been to San Diego before myself. So it was, yeah, I mean, you know, John's mentioning that San Diego is much nicer than LA. You know, it was really convenient. I mean, the airport was only like 10 minutes away from the hotel, and everything was just, you know, oceanside and everything. It was nice. It was a really, really nice couple of days, even regardless of the conference. So some of the things around Animate CC, both in the pre-conference and during the conference, we had a couple of things during the Adobe Communities events. So something I was involved with during this event was I talked about the Swift file format during the 90 minutes of creative tips. So I had about 10 minutes or so to talk about Swift and talk about some of the benefits of Swift, even apart from Flash Player. So just some of the different things that you can do with Swift. Why, you know, even if Flash Player just goes away tomorrow, that the Swift file format is something that is useful beyond something like Flash Player. Additionally, during these community events, and these events were held for Adobe Community Professionals, there was some Adobe Education Leader stuff, and also Adobe User Group Manager presence was there as well. So one of the things that we were able to do is have a number of kind of roundtable discussions with different product managers and the teams. And this year and last year, there was a good representation from the Adobe Animate team. So last year, of course, they were the Adobe Flash Professional team. But, you know, people like Ajay and so forth, there were about 4 or 5 of them that came over to Max, and they were able to sit down with a good group of us and just talk about both kind of animation in general, and on top of that, kind of the direction of Animate CC, where things are going, where they see their focus, and to get feedback from the community about sort of what's valuable to us in the program and what we would like to see included. So that's that was a really nice kind of roundtable discussion with them, and we had that discussion for about 60 minutes or so, so it was not insignificant. So additionally, there were a number of events at the live streaming booth from Max. So what Adobe did was they set up a live booth that they kind of kept going throughout the entire main 3 days of the show. And what they would do is have certain people show up and do different things. So they had illustrators and animators and, you know, all sorts of different people, photographers. And the evangelists would, kind of have a little back and forth discussion with demos. It was really a nice laid back kind of presentation. And this was done for Animate CC as well. So, it wasn't just Photoshop. It wasn't just Illustrator. Animate CC was definitely there. They had people like Chris Georginas, who's a well-known animator, longtime Flash user. Also, Josiah Brooks was there, also another character animator. And, just full 60-minute shows that just feature Adobe Animate and some of their work. And these can be found actually on YouTube. They recorded all of them. I was able to participate in a small session where a whole bunch of us got together and did a number of different tips. So I did a segment on the Swift file format and some of the new features in Animate CC with Michael Shays. And I've got the YouTube URL up there as well if you want to watch it. We talk about some pretty neat things. So additionally, there were a whole bunch of different sessions and labs. So the lab that I did, this was the kind of end result. And it was a beginning lab on both content creation, on animation, and a bit of interactivity as well. And, we were able to show a number of the newer features inside Adobe Animate CC 2017, which was nice. It was kind of strange during Max because you had the pre-conference days where nobody could really talk about what was coming up, and then they released everything right before Max officially started. And after then, you could talk, of course, about whatever you wanted to in the new versions. So all of my labs were able to cover the new versions. They were all completely sold out labs. So full rooms. Everybody had a computer that they could go along with. In addition to that, there was a wait list for each one, and I let people come in. People wanted to come in and just observe. So I had people standing along the walls and everything. And that's really good for Animate CC. The interest is really, really there. And definitely, I probably could have done, if there was room, more labs and done larger rooms and so forth. And I heard similar things from others who did labs. I know Chris Georginas did labs all 3 days as well, and he had a very similar experience to me. So those are the labs. In addition to the labs, for those who have never been to Max, whenever you take a lab at Adobe Max, one of the requirements is that the lab instructor creates a workbook that people are able to kind of follow along with. And I sort of went overboard this year, and I wrote up a 80-plus page workbook that goes through all the different steps. So this is something that I've also made available online through this URL right here. And actually, everything that I'm talking about that has to do with Max, if we go to my blog here, I've got a post all about that, just called Max 2016 Resources. And the URL is inflagrantedelicto.memoryspiral.com. And I have all the resources here. I've got a little chatter about different things. Incidentally, next year Max is going to be in Las Vegas at the Venetian. So, another change of scenery, which is nice. San Diego is really nice, but I haven't been to Vegas in a few years. When I've been to Vegas in the past, I can usually only handle a day or two, and it's just such a kind of sensory overload that it tires me out really quickly. So I'm a little bit scared of Vegas being in, or Max being in Vegas, but it should be interesting. I've got resources here on my lab, including the workbook, so you can download the PDF here if you want to do so. And I've also got all the asset files from my lab and all the slides from the lab, and additionally the Community Summit slides and the link to the YouTube video. of the recording with Michael Shays and I. And it's actually got a whole bunch of other ACPs on there as well. So if you're interested in anything else, definitely look at that. I'm pretty sure Myra Ferguson, who just wrote a book on Animate CC, I believe it's called How to Cheat in Adobe Animate CC. She's got a little segment on there as well. So more and more Animate content. Flash Player and Air stuff here as well, but I will get into that in the slides as we move along. So about Animate CC 2017. So the morning of, I've been doing a number of different small user tutorial videos for Adobe Learn, which is kind of like Adobe's help area. They've got all sorts of stuff on there. They've got little kind of step-by-step tutorials, written tutorials, a lot of like what's new in the products and so forth. And some of the stuff that I've been contracted to do are video tutorials. So one of the last ones that I did, and I'm not the animator for this particular one. This is Alex Flessig. But I was able to record a video on how to use the new camera tool inside of Animate CC 2017. And the morning it was released, I was kind of shocked to actually go to the Animate CC website and, see the material for this tutorial just front and center there. It's kind of a shock that things are getting so much attention now, right? Animate CC is big, and Adobe realizes that it is something that people want more resources about. And I think that's a really, really good message that is being sent out, whether it's intentionally being sent out or, it's just being sent out just from sheer observation, which I think is, it's probably a little bit of both, right? So what's actually new in Adobe Animate CC 2017? So the big thing is, well, there's a couple of big things actually. One of the big things is the integrated virtual camera. So I'll demo this in a little bit, but basically you've got a camera view that you can control to zoom in and out, to pan, to rotate. And if you're using an ActionScript 3 based file format targeting Flash Player Air, you're able to do even more. So I think this is a really good indication from Adobe. I mean, if you talk to the guys on the Adobe engineering team, they will say over and over that, Flash Player and Air are things that Adobe cares about. They know they need to support, and that they're going to continue to support into the foreseeable future. But then when you see them actually integrating ActionScript 3.0 document-specific features into some of the new tooling in Animate, that really cements their commitment to it. So there's also stage clipping and outline, which kind of works along with that. I'll demonstrate that as well. One of the other big new things is the HTML5 Canvas UI and video components. So just like we've had components inside of ActionScript documents, we now have components we can use inside of HTML5 Canvas, including video. There's also a bunch of stuff in terms of vector brush creation and management, sharing documents and symbols over CC libraries. So you can actually share movie clip symbols or an entire Animate CC document over CC libraries now. And it doesn't matter what format it is. If it's an ActionScript 3 document targeting Flash Player, you can share that through Creative Sync over the CC libraries, which I think is great. They've also totally revamped their image and animated GIF export. It works a lot like Photoshop now. And there's a new publish format, which is called Swift Archive. So again, this is something that's targeted to Swifts. It's a new feature. It's something to kind of keep an eye on. So as mentioned, Animate CC at MAX had a huge presence. There were sessions, there were labs. There was actually an all-day workshop on creating games in Animate CC as a pre-conference workshop. the live streams, the Animate product team was there, community discussions I mentioned, and also Birds of a Feather. So usually the first night of Max, they have Birds of a Feather where the general, attendees can go and meet the different teams at Adobe and talk about specific products. And the Animate CC team was involved in that as well. This is a slide taken from Ajay's slide, who is talking about, Animate CC and what the new features are and where it's going and so forth. And these are the 4 kind of things that they've been targeting for 2016 to build up Animate CC. So this is like the feature set that they're looking at. They're looking at character animation, games, educational content, and both web ads and general web content. And I think you can definitely tell that from the different features that have been released over 2016. So a lot of this stuff are things that people have been asking for a long, long time. Of course, Flash Professional for a while was actually, very developer focused, which is great for those of us who are developers. I'm more of a developer at this point than I am a designer or an animator. And I certainly appreciate any sort of, development stuff they can throw in there. However, there's been a lot of stuff that's been neglected, a lot on the creative side. If anybody remembers Macromedia Flash 8, when they had their Studio 8 release, there was a lot of stuff in there that was just like very design focused. That's where you got like the filters and effects like that. That was pretty big. That was fun to play with. And it's even fun for people who are more code centric, right? So it's interesting to see how things evolve. And of course, the pendulum is always swinging from one side to the other. You're always getting a focus in one area, and then other areas, people kind of whine about it, and they're like, oh no, nobody's paying attention to my specific niche. But the pendulum always swings back, right? So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind, especially for those who are thinking that, Adobe's completely abandoned my particular line of work when it comes to Animate CC. You never know what they're going to focus on in the coming years. So about the runtimes, weren't so much talked about, of course, during the Max conference. Like, it's not like Adobe Max 2010, 2011, where you had, an entire keynote dedicated to how great Flash Player and Air are, right? But what we did have was, coinciding with Max, a little bit before Max, were new beta releases for both Flash Player and Air. So this is Flash Player and Air 24, and there are some really, really interesting things that Adobe's releasing inside of the runtimes. One of those things is spherical video support. This is something I would never imagine that Adobe would actually commit to, but it's in the betas and there's documentation on it. If you go to labs.adobe.com, you can read the release notes, and they've got some stuff up there. Additionally, I don't know if people have really kept a good eye on this, but a lot of people will say that Adobe DevNet, right? They're kind of developer articles, that it's dead. However, the Flash Player and Air team, the runtimes team, they actually release new articles, like in-depth technical articles on how to take advantage of new features in the runtimes. And they release these pretty regularly. If you haven't gone on there in a while and you're still using the runtimes for different things, there's a lot of good stuff in there. And I imagine we're going to see stuff on things like spherical video support in the future. But you've also got things like high-resolution display support on Firefox for Windows, HTTP and HTTPS permissions for camera and microphone, and really interesting is, if you haven't heard before, they're actually starting to support Linux again with Flash Player, which, Adobe dropped Flash Player on Linux in terms of NPAPI a few years ago, saying that, it's just going to be Chrome. Whatever's built into Chrome is what Linux people get. However, they're actually releasing new versions of NPAPI for Linux. So that's really interesting. in terms of Air, and there's actually enough stuff, new stuff inside of Air 24 to warrant 2 different slides here. There's Apple TV support. So, I mean, you can think of this as an entirely new platform, even though it is, technically kind of iOS-ish. It's still a new platform. It's kind of similar to what we saw with Android when they started supporting both Intel and ARM processors. So you've got this expansion of platforms here. You've got things that are very specific to it, like Siri remote support, stage text support for Apple TV, A&E support. So if you're writing ActionScript native extensions, they're supported on Apple TV. You've also got things like swipe velocity for both Android and iOS, and an Android SDK upgrade to API level 24. And just like Flash Player, you've got spherical video support. Asynchronous texture upload for mobile. I know that's something that a lot of people are really interested in who work in the kind of like a stage 3D area. Some of the more technical people who are interested in Air. I love using the different frameworks like Starling and Feathers and so forth that are that are built upon stage 3D. But if I had to actually do stage 3D stuff myself, it's very, very difficult, and I wouldn't want to do it. So I rely on other people to do that who know a lot more about it than I do. You've got anti-aliasing using config back buffer, permissions settings, custom fonts for stage text. So that's pretty cool. That's a long time coming, probably about 5 years or so. And then you've got instance drawing on Air Desktop Beta, which I understand is a big deal as well. So updated runtime statistics. Back at last Max, it was really interesting to see some of the numbers and the stats around the runtimes. And this year, they released, so this is part of, again, Ajay's session at Max, which was held twice. And, this is an Animate CC session, yet he's talking about Flash Player and Air. Again, really good to see these sort of things. What's interesting here is that Air application installs have gone to 8 billion recorded. Unique mobile applications built with Air are now at 500K plus. And, the Flash Player stats are pretty stable, actually. You've got 1 billion monthly updates directly from Adobe.com, and that is completely apart from anything that's built into Chrome or IE or anything like that, or the Edge browser. It's completely separate. So people are still downloading tons of Flash Player. And, Windows 10 has it. It's pre-installed. Still, 9 out of 10 Facebook games use Flash Player. So it's really not going anywhere, despite what you see in the tech journalist area. Recent top developments, a lot of that is kind of the same stuff that we've seen, over the past year or so when it comes to the runtimes. They mentioned the Apple TV stuff and so forth. Additionally, and I just added this slide right here. I see that Josh is on the call here. I just thought this was so cool. I've been following his work in Visual Studio Code and Next-Gen AS. And really, this is really great stuff, especially with, what's going on with Flash Builder, which is nothing, obviously, and what's going on with, things like IntelliJ that do support Flex and ActionScript. But they've actually, and, they announced this quite a while ago, that they're sort of, not putting as many resources. They're backing off from that. I'm not sure exactly what the current state is. I know all of my stuff that I run in IntelliJ 15 today runs just fine, anything that's ActionScript or Flex-based. But in the future, I guess there's a very real concern about them actually just dropping that, or... I know it's been stated that they're going to sort of open source it and give it to the community and so forth, but we'll see what happens with that. This is really cool. I like Visual Studio Code a lot. I've been using it for like Angular 2 projects and things. And to see support for ActionScript was really cool. To see support for MXML for both, traditional Flex applications and also Flex.js is like super, super cool. And, this is great stuff here, and I think people should be aware of it. All right, so enough. Visual Studio is not Windows only. Visual Studio is completely cross-platform. You might think it is because Microsoft built it, but they've been doing a lot of really, really good stuff around, being open source, being cross-platform. And Visual Studio Code is definitely up there as one of the major achievements Microsoft has done in the past year or two around that area. And of course, since we're talking about Max, Microsoft for the past 2 years has been like a platinum sponsor or something like that, or a diamond sponsor. I can't remember the technical terms, but a very high-level sponsor at Adobe Max. So let's see. Oh, yeah, Josh mentions there that VS Code even runs on Linux. Flex.js 2 tested on Ubuntu. So, I mean, that's great. You've got, Adobe working on supporting all that stuff on Ubuntu, and incrementally. It doesn't have, like, for instance, the stuff they're doing with the runtimes on Linux. They don't have all of the features that you've got on like Windows and I guess Mac OS now, OS 10. But it's better than having nothing at all, right? And who knows? Incremental stuff, right? So let's pop into Animate CC and check out some of the bigger new features that we have here. And I'm going to use a couple of my actual pieces from the Max workshop that I did here. Here's one of the sequences that we had. And this is actually a version in ActionScript. If I go ahead and do a Control-Enter here, we can see the full animation, and then we can talk about exactly what's going on here. So you might imagine it's actually using the virtual camera here. And let's see that in action. So you'll notice something new inside of Animate right off the bat is this border that you have around the stage. So in previous versions of Animate, you zoom in on something like this and you've got stuff overlaying the pasteboard and the stage, and you cannot see anything. You don't know where the stage stops and starts. And you'd have to go ahead and turn on outlines or something to be able to actually see the stage. Huge pain in the butt. I'm used to going ahead and actually, either masking out a bunch of stuff with a mask layer, or even just having my own manual outline that I just use as a guide layer. But, that's not ideal, right? Here's something that Adobe's done. They've added this stage outline, and the outline appears sort of on the outside portion of the stage. And along with the outline, you've got this little button up here that toggles the visibility of the pasteboard content on and off. So if I click this, then we have complete focus on what's actually going on in the stage and what can actually be seen by the user. Right? So that's a great, 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 great feature as far as I'm concerned, because it's something that's driven me crazy for the past, 10, 15 years or so of using Flash Professional and now Animate CC. So as you can see here, we've created this basic thing where we've got the moon, and the disk of the moon sort of rises up across the horizon. You've got the bay here, and this is the San Diego skyline. And I do some effects such as the gradients in the sky and so forth. So it's a lot of really elementary stuff, and we go through it in the workbook quite a bit. However, the thing that I want to kind of highlight here is this camera layer. So this is something you haven't been able to do in the past when using Animate. And you can actually toggle that on and off from right here. It says remove camera, as you can see, but that isn't actually what happens. It just sort of toggles it on and off. So here, the camera is no longer being applied, and we have sort of what you would normally see at the correct stage size. But I can toggle that back on at any time, and then it's re-enabled. As you can see here, we've got some additional controls that overlay the screen. And there's also a dedicated camera tool inside of the toolbar. So we can pan the camera around. Here, let's zoom in first. So you can choose zoom or rotate from these two little toggles here. Let's zoom in. And notice I can then go ahead and pan the camera. And I can zoom in more if I want to, pan more. I can also toggle rotation on. And then I can go ahead and actually rotate the entire stage, which is pretty interesting. And this all kind of just, works as expected, right? So you're able to do any of this stuff. And you can, as you can see here, use a motion tween as I have right here. And if I go ahead and go to like frame 60, which doesn't currently have any sort of keyframe on it whatsoever, and let's go ahead and rotate and then zoom in. Hey, don't do that. Zoom in and then pan and so forth. It adds another keyframe because it's just a motion tween, and that looks incredibly strange. If I go ahead and play that. So, that doesn't look good at all, but that's okay because I'm just demonstrating the tools here. So when you have the camera tool selected, and I think this is incredibly important, you've got your controls to zoom and rotate. So this is just another version of what you have over here on these sort of visual tooling. But you've also got these. So camera color effects, where you can adjust the tint. So you can turn that up or down, and you can adjust each of these channels. So if I wanted to have like a red tint over everything, I can just pull down the blue and the green, keep the red at 255, and just yank up that tint as much as I want. So this way you can do some neat color effects to the entire stage, just as you would do through like movie clip symbols and things like that. You've also got color adjustments. So adjusting color, you can change the brightness, the contrast, and even the saturation. So you could go like totally black and white if you wanted to. And I'm doing a terrible, terrible job at this here, but I think it probably, does demonstrate the different things that you can do if you want inside of an ActionScript 3 document. So if we go over to the Canvas version of this, and we have our camera selected, you'll notice that we cannot adjust any of the camera color effects. So this is something they've added that is ActionScript 3 only. So what's interesting about this is that when you talk to people who are animators, who use Animate CC, they're not using right out of the gate the HTML5 Canvas stuff. Of course, if you're targeting web through web ads and, doing things that are for e-learning for web or web content, a lot of those people are focused on HTML5 Canvas. But traditional animators, character animators and so forth, who have been doing things for years inside of Flash, they actually still use, for the most part, the ActionScript 3 document type because you have all these extra tools. You've got things like the 3D rotation and translation tools, you have the full text tools, full blend mode support, full sound design, streaming types, a whole bunch of different stuff that you just don't have in other document formats. And that's not to say, I love being able to use the Canvas document type and publish for Canvas and have stuff that just runs in the browser no problem, that I don't have to worry about people not having Flash Player. Some things, of course, I do have to worry about them not having, Chrome or Firefox or something. In terms of what you can throw at the stage at once, that's going to obviously vary by device and so forth, but, it always has. So I guess my point is that, Adobe is actually adding things to Animate CC, like big time release features that have properties that are right now dependent upon something like Flash Player or Air. So that's really good for those of us who are interested in continuing to use these formats. And again, even though, they've done a great deal of work in HTML5 Canvas and using JavaScript inside of Animate CC, they'll tell you straight off the bat that they see Animate CC as platform agnostic at this point. So if you want to use an ActionScript 3 document type, you have their blessing. If you want to use HTML5 Canvas, go for it. If you want to use WebGL, if you want to use Snap SVG, they're just trying to build the tools in such a way where you're able to use this stuff mostly across everything. Of course, there are exceptions with some of the tooling and in things like the camera color effects. So that is the deal with the camera. Since we're inside of an ActionScript document type, let's go ahead and actually look at the other kind of big new feature in my estimation, which is components for HTML5 Canvas. So if you open up components inside of an HTML5 Canvas document, oh, there we go. It opened up off screen, so I'll just drag it over. You can see here that we have user interface components, video components, and jQuery UI components. So this is something that's pretty much completely new to Animate CC, especially in terms of HTML5 Canvas. If you're familiar with ActionScript 3 components, you'll immediately see that we don't have as many. However, a lot of the common ones we do have, and some of the other ones are particular to that platform. For instance, CSS. Using the CSS component, you can actually drag this onto the stage and then point to a CSS file externally that gets bundled into your project, where you're able to go ahead and reskin, restyle any of these other components. So that's an interesting feature. You haven't been able to do that with ActionScript 3 components. Of course, those components have their own specific methods of styling and skinning and so forth, which HTML5 Canvas does not have. So you've got two different ways of doing things here. But you have very basic stuff like buttons, images, labels, and you also have things like lists and steppers and so forth. A really big one is this video component here. So you're now able to actually play back video inside of an HTML5 Canvas document. And if you're curious how all this works, what any of these little components do is they actually are DOM elements that overlay the canvas. And you're able to, of course, interact with them from canvas to the DOM, back and forth, and so forth. If you're curious on how that happens, we can also go into our code snippets panel, which of course opens up off screen as well. So I'll drag that in. And inside of HTML5 Canvas, you've got a new components subcategory with user interface, video, and jQuery. So for video, you can see like quickie snippets on how to play a video, pause a video, all that sort of junk. And for user interface, you've got their basics there too. I'll mention as well that it's completely available to anyone who wants to do it to go ahead and create their own custom component set. So you can do this. They've got some examples online and so forth. And on the Adobe Learn site for Animate CC, they actually have a number of different articles that go through what the different pieces inside of a component are for HTML5 Canvas and so forth. But one of the easiest ways to examine these things is just to kind of copy one of the existing components out of the file structure and just open it up in brackets or Visual Studio Code and just start kind of messing with it. And you're able to create your own kind of variants of these different components or completely new things if you want to. For instance, you've got some jQuery UI stuff here, such as date picker and radio set. There's no reason that you couldn't integrate more jQuery UI stuff in here based on these two models. The last thing that I probably want to show is the SWF archive output. And actually, I'll grab this this guy here. This is the actual. Let's fit in window and turn that off. This is the actual file that we used to do those videos on the new camera tool and camera support and so forth. So having a look at this, if we go to publish settings, we can see that this is targeting Flash Player 23. You've got a ton of options in here at this point when you're working inside of an ActionScript 3 document. And one of the new ones is Swift Archive. So using Swift Archive, what this will do is actually output a zip file that contains multiple Swift files. Each of these Swift files are generated based upon layers. So you'll have a Swift file called prints. You'll have one called rocks, one called birds, one called clouds, and so on. And these Swift files you can then take into anything else that supports Swift. So you can take it, for instance, into Adobe After Effects and do some additional compositing on them and then output a video sequence or whatever. So this is something that people have been doing for years where they just sort of like hide, they just sort of hide a number of the particular layers that they don't want to output, and then they output the rest as a Swift, and then toggle things around to output the necessary elements as individual Swifts, then bring it into After Effects. Now you've got this Swift archive format, so if that's part of your workflow, you can actually do that in one step now. And I know there's something else. Oh, yes. So export options. If you go to File and you choose Export, you can now go ahead and export animated GIF or image. There's also the legacy image export. And whichever one of these we choose, it's going to bring us into this neat new dialog. Here it comes. And it's a big, big dialog. So I'm not sure if it's going to fit in my little presentation monitor here. Come on. Oh, goodness. I think I may have just destroyed it somehow. Let's see. Come on. Oh, here it comes. Oh, so here's what's going on. I probably shouldn't have done it on this particular file because it has like a lot of layers on there. The animator, as animators tend to do inside of Animate, they have layers upon layers of animation. And now I'm trying to process an animated GIF out of that. So it's taking a little bit of time to actually go ahead and process that. There we go. So I'd better not actually change any of these settings, or else it's going to have to go through and process that all over again. However, let me pull this out onto my larger monitor so I can try and kind of wrangle the size of this thing and then bring it back. Well, that's pretty close. There's going to be some things that are cut off here just because I'm working at a 1280 by 760 resolution here. But basically, if you've used Photoshop at all in the past, you'll recognize this. It's very, very similar to what Photoshop has when you export stuff for the web. So you've got all sorts of different presets here. You've got your different GIF presets, and this will actually generate an animated GIF. You can see that this particular animated GIF is about 40 megabytes, which is not what you want. This is a really, really bad example of this feature. But, if you were to go ahead and actually take the width and height down to something that approaches reasonability, this would go way down. Additionally, you could make some tweaks here to make it much, much smaller than it is at present. But you're able to, of course, do JPEGs, PNGs, and Ping24s from here as well. And it's a much, much nicer image export experience, especially when you're doing stuff as animated GIF. If you've done stuff exporting as animated GIF using Animate CC or Flash Professional in the past, it's really it generates really chunky looking animated GIFs. This, depending upon the settings that you choose, can actually be really nice. So that is another big feature of this new release. And that's it for the demos. We're about 45 minutes in, so that is pretty much on target. I want to talk about a couple of resources and upcoming events. So one thing that's coming up here on December the 10th, there's going to be 4 of us who are really heavily involved in Animate CC that are going to be doing a little 90-minute presentation. So if you want to see Tom, Myra, myself, and Chris talk about Animate CC, and I guarantee that anything that we talk about is going to be pretty much completely different. For instance, Chris is, a character animator, whereas I'm not. Myra is, she does a lot of creative stuff with compositing in Animate CC. And then we have Tom, and Tom does what Tom does, right? So, definitely join us for that if you're interested in seeing different perspectives on Animate CC. In terms of some publications that I have out there, this is something I did for Lynda and LinkedIn Learning. And honestly, over the past year and a half, I've done so many things for Lynda on Animate CC that there's so much stuff out there. This is the latest one. It's the new features of Animate CC 2017. So it's kind of like an expanded version, a much expanded version of what some of the features that I showed off today are in the demos. It's about 45 minutes. So, check it out if you have a subscription. And I've got courses on here on, interactive animation and data-driven animation and all sorts of stuff. I've been doing some things for Pluralsight as well. These are some things that came over from Train Simple, who was acquired by Pluralsight earlier this year. So I have a couple of courses on there, Animate CC game development and also a mobile development course. This is a book that I published in March through Peachpit and Adobe Press, and it's very much focused on the ACAs, the Adobe Certified Associate exams. So the book, of course, can be used. I wrote it in such a way that, it was applicable to people who don't really care that much about the ACAs, but just want to learn Animate. There's 6 big projects in there that you can go through, and it'll teach you basically all of the basics around Animate CC. There's also this book I'm writing with Tom Green, and this is coming out sometime next year, probably March or April. And this is a much more comprehensive book because it's a lot thicker. This book here is about 250 pages, but it also comes with like 6 hours of video content as well. Whereas this book is going to be like 600 or 700 pages. So it's kind of a monster. And I'm still finishing that up right now, so look out for that. And that's all I've got. We've got about, like 5 minutes left. If anybody has particular questions about Animate CC or Max or anything that we talked about here. But, if not, thank you all for coming. And I will make this available, and I believe John will as well.